Golf course infrastructure should be the last tutorial that you have to fight through, at least for the time being. We are going to be adding, I think, to the material that we put on the website. Hopefully, because people believe that this kind of information is useful and that members feel more educated after viewing them. So we're ending with this one because I think this is the best discussion point, infrastructure, to kind of come full circle to some of the things we talked about early on, which is we are not trying to focus on the things that normally occupy the discussion of colonial members, either green surfaces or let's say, do you like the golf course just fine as it is, or do you like Gil's work? And I know many of you maybe haven't seen Gil's work, and you, if you haven't, you will, and we can talk about that later. But we're consciously trying to focus on the things almost irrelevant to the architecture, almost irrelevant to the green surfaces. It's all of the things underneath, or all of the things that support, or all of the nuts and bolts of the golf course. So if we all get on kind of the same page here, I think we'll be much better equipped to have these discussions later about green surfaces or architecture or whatever, because you can't build and maintain modern golf courses without this infrastructure. So what we're going to do here is we have a chart. A golf course consultant, former golf course superintendent at many fine golf courses, has been involved in many renovations. His name is Terry Buchan. Put together a chart a year or so ago which gives the average lifespan of golf course infrastructure elements. And it's a very nice kind of objective source to go through and then compare Colonial's infrastructure to the chart. Where do we stack up? What things could we expect to say that they're already kind of worn out? What kind of things do we have lifespan in? What is the state of our golf course infrastructure? So at the end of this, hopefully, you have a better sense of, a way to answer this question: how much of our golf course infrastructure is worn out or is wearing out? All right, here is the chart that I have referred to. And here's the source: Terry Buchan, certified golf course superintendent. This can be found in Golf Course Magazine, a riveting publication, by the way, August 2017, if you'd like to look at it in more detail. And basically, as soon as I saw this, I thought, man, what a great vehicle to use to talk about golf course infrastructure life expectancies. I had not seen this all put together comprehensively before in a nice chart, so I thought Terry did a wonderful job. Terry has a lot of experience in construction projects, a lot of experience on golf courses in general, so he's a good expert to put together this chart. So I've taken his chart, which is this part right here, and then I've added to it a couple of little elements. So here is the average. This column is basically taking his average. 12 to 25, we'll make it 19. 10 to 12, we make it 10. So we'll use this as our reference points. This is the chart average. for the various golf course infrastructure life expectancies. This column is colonials. That is, we're taking, as of 2020, our actual age of these various infrastructure. So if it says plus, we are over life expectancy. If it is green, we are under. And again, to put it in a little cute metaphor, we have a great used car, but it's got a lot of miles on it. However well taken care of it has been, and we have to ask ourselves, how much more can we reasonably expect to get out of this car? Do we need to consider buying a new? Okay, as promised, the first half of the Buchan chart. Let's just go through it point by point. We'll start with greens. Rebuild greens, collars, and surrounds, a USGA or California-based green, 12 to 25 years, so 19 years, the average. Colonial average in 2020, they will be 21 years old, 2 years over. Mentioned this in an earlier slide, but I will say this. If you would have told people, myself included, or anybody in 1999 or 2000 or 2001 or 2002 or 2005, that we would end up getting 21 years out of our existing greens, I think everyone would have been shocked. Collars, 10 years on average, will be 2 years over at 2020. Similarly, tees, 10 years average, 2 years over 2020. Fairways, 13 years average, will be 27 years over, or 14 years over expected life. The other part of these are, we also need new genetics in tees and fairways and approaches, our shortcut areas. We need to take advantage of better grasses that are out there now. Approaches, 13 years, and will in 2020 will be 1 year away from peak expectancy. Roughs, it says 18 years. It's hard to even know what kind of grasses we have out there in rough. I almost guarantee we have some grass out there that is original to the golf course, that was there in the 30s. Some common Bermuda probably. But it's a real hodgepodge of common and fescue and different Bermudas and different fescues and a little zoysia here and there. And so it's clearly past its prime by any measure. The other thing is, if we could get a uniform grass, genetics-wise, in our roughs, the look, just the cosmetic appearance of our rough will be crazy improved, because right now it's always just kind of a mottled, it never looks really smooth and continuous because there's so many different grasses in there. They grow at different times, they green up at different times, they go dormant at different times. So we would do an amazing amount of improvement cosmetic wise to get uniform standard rough. Intermediate rough, 13 years, like the fairways. 27 years old, 14 years over expected life expectancy. Bunkers, still a little bit of a surprise to think about this, but even though it seems like we just did the bunkers, 2008, they are at the end of their effective lifespan. They will be 1 year away from the lifespan in 2020, and it just kind of speaks to the difficulty in maintaining bunkers according to modern standards. Similarly, replacing sand and replacing the drainage and the piping and the liners, he's got 5 to 7 years 5 to 8 years or 7 years on average replacement. We haven't replaced the sand every year. We replace it a little bit every year, but we haven't wholesale taken it out. So clearly that is due. And then the drainage and the liners, we haven't replaced the drainage at all, but we did replace the liners about 5 and 6 years ago because the original liner wore out. And the current liner does not wear out. It still has plenty of life left in it. But again, if you're going to redo the bunkers, you redo the liners as well. The next major section here, irrigation system, I'd like to take a little bit more time with, but let me make a note here. We're going to have a separate tutorial, a separate kind of breakout for irrigation only that you can go through in some detail because it's such an important component to golf courses, obviously. But just for the chart, I want to cover our life expectancy issues with the irrigation system. So, replace controllers, wiring, sprinkler heads, swing joints, 8 to 10 years. So 9 years on average. Ours, 22 years old, 12 years over. Now, I will say that I think Buchan's recommendation here of replacing wiring, sprinkler heads, and swing joints is a little aggressive. I don't think that's typical in 9 years. Now, you will replace some of these components. You will replace some wiring. You'll definitely replace some sprinkler heads and some swing joints. So he is talking about things that wear out, parts of the irrigation system that do wear out. But I would say 9 years is a little aggressive, but clearly 22 is not. I mean, we can say that we may not be 12 years over, but we are clearly at the expected lifespan of our wiring, sprinkler heads, and swing joints. And the next section here is on your piping itself. So we have, typical to golf courses, irrigation systems done 20 years ago, PVC. It's the white pipe that you're probably very familiar with, which basically pipes everything, various sizes throughout the golf course. Expected lifespan, 20 to 25 years, 23 years on average. Ours will be 22 years old in 2020, so it is clearly up. And while you typically don't have the PVC fail all at once, you do have, when it gets to its lifespan, and we're seeing a little bit of this, just more and more pipe failures over time, and more and more repair. Now, this other category here, HDPE, which is high density polyethylene, is the current standard for irrigation pipe. It's what we did do when we did the irrigation in our driving range. We used HDPE, and we haven't had a problem with it in 7 years. It's a completely different material. It's a thick black pipe that is actually welded together. You don't have glued joints to fail. And it has a 40 to 45 year lifespan. When we do the irrigation, we will do it all in HDPE. So the beauty of this next irrigation renovation will be not only that it's improvement in everything in piping and in irrigation technology and head technology and pump technology, we're going to be able to add 40 to 45 year threshold for the piping system itself, which again is the hardest thing to change, hardest thing to get to because it's in the ground. So we will be adding, basically doubling the life expectancy for the next irrigation system by using this new technology. And finally, replacing pump station fertigation, 8 to 10 years. This is a little bit like the wiring and sprinkler head and swing joint thing. I think that's a little aggressive for most people. Normally your pump stations are not changed out every 9 years. But I would say I'm comfortable in saying in 22 years, it has reached its limitation. We are getting more and more repairs on it. And I will also say that just the technology, again, of modern pump stations, it's much more power efficient, much more efficient at delivering water. The curves that you see out there hydraulically into the system are much flatter and nicer. They've made a lot of improvements, obviously, in 20 years. All right, second half of the chart. This one should go a little more quickly. I will start with drainage. Clear take home, our drainage is old, very old, and needs to be replaced. I will also say not just old, but it is insufficient for our carrying capacity requirement. So we have kind of a double whammy. We have some concrete pipe that's supposed to carry water from where it enters the property on one, underneath the entire golf course, underneath the bathroom, and out to the Trinity. A lot of you know that pipe has failed in numerous places over and over, and it's too small. And we have, as a result, chronic problems of water on the front side of the golf course that are a result of insufficient infrastructure in our drainage there. Whether metal pipe or single wall pipe or double wall pipe, it's all old and it's all under capacity, basically. Cart paths. Ours are primarily concrete, 15 to 20 years, 18 years. So I don't even know how to estimate our cart path age. They're so varied, but clearly 12 to 45 is probably pretty good range. On average, we're over, and I don't have to convince anybody that our cart paths, wall to wall, are in need of replacement. They're bad. Lakes dredging, I won't spend a whole lot of time here because in general, the kind of interesting thing is Gil is going to kind of naturalize our watersheds. So I don't know that he'll be wanting to dredge. Our irrigation pond, I don't think, needs more capacity. It's not bad. It would be the only one you'd want to consider it. And it's actually going to kind of get filled in a little bit on our, or naturalized, it's probably a better word, on the pump house side. So we are over on kind of typical maintenance for lakes. And it remains to be seen what we may or may not want to do with them with respect to the renovation. But I'm guessing not a lot of expense. Bridges. This one is kind of interesting. We have a number of bridges, and it does say 19 years or so to look at the structural components of the bridges. Now, I'm not an engineer, but it probably does mean that we need to look at our current bridges with an engineer and make sure they are structurally sound. Tunnels, we don't have any. Sumps, pipes, grates, same thing. We'll go down here to the driving range. Another good thing about this chart is you can kind of see clearly, you know, where you have issues or don't. I'd say in general, the driving range is the only area that we still have some effective lifespan left because it was done in 2011. But even with that said, there's some areas that are coming up. Relevel practice tee, that's a good example, 9 years. Now, we were right at that in 2020. It would be, I think, a necessity, even if it weren't a lifespan issue, that when we redo our fairways and tees or whatever grass we use there, we need to use on the driving range practice tees as well. So I believe we'll need to resurface at minimum. Rebuild the practice tee. Again, that's kind of a structural thing. We'll have to look at that when we get to it. It wouldn't, this has come up anyway, but we certainly have looked at expanding the fronts of both sides of the tee boxes to just get more area. I think that would be a very good idea. And if you're going to do that, you may go into your existing tee decks as well. Short game practice area, regrass greens, 10 years. That Bermuda green is 7 years old now. Or I'm sorry, the green itself is 7 years old. The Bermuda green, I think, is 5 years old. So it's not up yet. Rebuild the entirety of the green. It's got a lot of lifespan left. So if we wanted to rebuild the existing green as is, I think we could just strip the turf off and add sand and depending on what kind of grass we end up using, unless we wanted to keep it Bermuda, which is fine. Regrass tees, fairways, and rough. We're about middle of the range. Replace bunker sand. We're at capacity, and then rebuild the bunkers. The bunkers that we have, the practice bunker on the Bermuda Green was the one really we'd probably be talking about. It's still got some lifespan left in it. So, of all the areas that we do have a little life left, for good or bad, it would be driving range. Well, I'm going to try to do a little summation here. So, a little bit of a review, but since this is theoretically anyway kind of the last slide in this initial grouping of tutorials, I thought it was a good place to put it. So, after the infrastructure information, I think should be fairly apparent that many elements of our golf course are worn out. Cart paths, some drainage, watershed issues, and many of them are wearing out and clearly reaching the limitations of their expected lifespan. Greens, irrigation, etc. Major components are due to be replaced. So, if we start with that knowledge, if we ground our discussion of everything that kind of follows from that in that, then we're fine. We're fine. We can say the golf course is fine as it is, and if we mean architecturally it's fine as it is, a perfectly acceptable position that people can take. Most people love this golf course, so you're clearly in good stead. But that's really, in some ways, more of the architectural discussion of, how does Gil take the existing golf course and very subtly try to return it a little bit more to the old golf course? Well, that's the architectural discussion. We're not doing that. So if you say that golf course is fine as it is, and you mean architecturally fine as it is, we just gonna have people that express opinions. But if you say the golf course is fine as it is, and you really mean we don't need to ever think about in the near future doing anything with respect to greens, grassing, cart paths, drainage, irrigation, bunkers, etc., the chart, then you're staking out a position that probably just doesn't have much support, at least by experts, if you consider Terry Buchan and or me or most golf course superintendents that find themselves in this position. You look at the golf course and realize you haven't touched it wall to wall since the golf course was built in the mid-30s. Colonial is due for a complete wall-to-wall renovation, largely because as you continue to stretch your infrastructure, it's going to become more and more difficult to provide great results for members. So again, related to that, chronic flood issues that are clearly getting worse as more and more water gets on us more quickly. I think we have to start addressing some of that, or we're going to see more and more impacts to the golf course if we don't. The genetics that we have the opportunity to take advantage of, the 20, 30 years of selective breeding of superior bentgrass and superior Bermuda grass, gives us an opportunity to, again, if we're going to address all of the things underneath, all of the infrastructure that require tearing up the golf course to change it out or to fix them, what goes right along with that is new playing surfaces, better grasses that provide superior playability, superior drought tolerance, superior heat tolerance, all of that. And then finally, this is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but we're going to have at some point, clearly I think, the architectural work on the website as well. Again, we just wanted to kind of get ahead of that a little bit and not have that discussion at this point. But the ability to take Gil Hanse's work, and obviously people will have to come to some sense of how they feel about that. But I'm extremely excited about it, and the fact that it's grounded so much in the history of our old golf course, especially trying to get as much of that back as we can. You put all this together, and again, the architecture and the green surfaces that we're always talking about really come after the discussion of all these other problems or issues that we need to address. That is, they're complementary. They're not necessarily pushing the need to renovate. They are complementary to the need to renovate because of all the other things that we need to address. So that's, I think, the meta point that at this point we are trying to make. To reorient the discussion a little bit and to make sure that we all have in mind that we do have issues, that we do have things we need to address, and regardless of what we do with the green surfaces, and regardless of what we do with the architecture, we are going to be addressing those in the near future. Thanks.